Hey guys, it's Dana. Welcome back to my channel. Excuse my voice, I'll tell you about that in a second. Today we are going to do part one of 2 or 3 videos, I'm not sure yet, on crafting on a budget. So here I'm showing you stamp sets, 3 packs of paper, and a tape runner that I got at Joann Fabrics. Oh, and an embossing folder, I forgot about that. Now the stamp sets, the embossing folder, the paper pads, they were all Miss Sparkle and Company at Joann Fabrics, and they're $1.99 a piece. And if you have a coupon, you can even get money off total purchase, etc. And the tape runner came from AC Moore, and it was $1.66. So here I'm just going through and showing you everything I got. This stuff I just picked up about a week ago. I do have 2 additional stamp sets that I'm going to pull out today that also came from Joann Fabrics in the $1.99 bin from last year during Thanksgiving and fall. So here, I love this holographic paper. I might go back to buy the rest of these pads just for that paper. So my voice. Okay, I've been doing a lot of coughing tonight. I had a pulmonologist appointment yesterday. Here I'm just cutting these pieces of glitter cardstock down to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. Anyway, the pulmonologist said, "Are you wheezing?" And I said, "Not that I know of." And she goes, "Are you sick?" And I said, "Well, yeah, the kids got me sick." We're going to put each one of these one at a time into the embossing folder and put them through your die cutting machine. Make sure you follow the directions for your die cutting machine. I know that even though I followed the directions for my Gemini Junior, I had to add a shim for them to emboss the glitter cardstock properly. Now I flipped them all over and I made sure they were all facing the same direction, and I labeled them 1, 2, 3, top, middle, bottom, because I'm going to cut each panel at 1 3/4 inches. So anyway, she listens to my chest and says, "Oh yeah, you're wheezing. Are you bringing stuff up?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she says, "What color is it?" And I said, "Green." And she goes, "Okay, antibiotic and prednisone for you." I hate taking prednisone, guys, but I guess I'm just doomed. Anytime the kids get me sick, I'm bound to hang on to it because of my lung problems. So I am on the cusp of getting rid of it. I just started my antibiotic yesterday and the prednisone, unfortunately. And hopefully the next time I edit a video, you guys will hear a normal voice. Okay, so as you can see, I was having a little bit of problem with this because I knew I wanted to use one of each color. And I couldn't do it the traditional way because putting it across, because they weren't all number 1 from the same panel, if you're following what I'm saying. Eventually I did figure it out, as you can see here, and I left this in on purpose so you guys could see what a hard time I had trying to figure this out. But I did eventually get it. Excuse me 1 second. So yeah, then I look at the numbers, double check I have a 1, 2, and 3 in each line, and then I started playing Switch Me, and that was it. Alright, so on the first set, we're going to use some orange blush, I think it's called. I'll have it listed below as usual. Embellishment mousse. Now the point of this is to craft on a budget, so use whatever you have. If you don't have this, maybe you have another color that's fall-like, or maybe you have glimmer paste in a color that you like. I lightly went over each one, and I was hoping it would just get the raised images, but with the blending brush, that did not happen. So after I blended all of them lightly, I went with a cloth and just wiped off the raised images, and then left the color onto the background. And I don't know if you guys can see that, my screen is so tiny. For the second set, I powder up each piece really good with the powder bag, and then I run over it lightly with my embossing ink pad. And I'm using gold embossing powder, Ranger Gold embossing powder, for the raised images. Now this worked fairly well. Make sure you go lightly with your embossing pad, and make sure that you do it like I did. I tried pressing my paper on first onto the pad. That didn't work. It goes too far in. The problem with this cardstock from Miss Sparkle & Company is when I heated up the embossing powder, it curled. But we're going to fix that. So the third set, I used vintage gathered twigs, Distress Oxide, and lightly went over it the same way I did with the embossing ink pad so that it covered just the raised images. Now I set that aside to dry, and I start working on the orange blush set, the Nouveau Embellishment Mousse, and we're going to put those on a piece of vellum first and then put them on a piece of craft cardstock as the card base. Make sure you line them up the same way you cut them or your images won't match up. This one I did end up taping them down a little crooked, so I had to trim my vellum down afterwards. But that's okay. It looks okay. So here I am trimming it down. This is the only one of the three that goes flat to the card base. So I thought the vellum was enough, and I just used that $1.66 tape runner from AC Moore, and I tacked that down onto the craft card base. I don't use craft often. Enjoy it, guys. I think the only time I ever use it is around autumn. So there's that one, the base of, or the card front for that one. There I am putting my heavy iron onto the curling set. I know I've told you guys about this iron before. I got it as a birthday gift from my friend Sarah. I use it all the time as a paperweight. Okay, so that ink was still wet. I dried it with my heat gun. It was still wet. So I decided to go over those three panels with clear embossing powder. And this time when I used the heat gun, you can see down at the very bottom of the screen there, and then I show it again, I kept it straight to the glass mat and heated it that way. It did not curl as much. So there's a tip for you. If I would have known that, I would have done it with the first set, or the other set. So there's the clear I really like the way the gold embossing powder and the oxide with the clear embossing powder turned out. So those ones that curled, we're going to put them on foam, fun foam. So they curled so much, I wanted to make sure I put them on the side that needed glue. Lined them all up the way I wanted, added the glue as I went along so I didn't get my hands all in it. My voice probably sounds horrible. I know it sounds horrible to me. Then I put the iron on those and set it to the side. Now we're going to use a piece of red fun foam, and we're going to do the other set, the Distress Oxide set. So this time I used the sticky side first because these didn't curl as much. Plus my iron was otherwise indisposed, so I couldn't use it on two panels at once. So I'm going to trim that down to get rid of the extra fun foam. Now at the very end, I chipped a tiny piece off of the glitter cardstock. See it right there? I was not throwing that away. It's in a corner. I couldn't think of a way to cover it that wouldn't look weird. So I just glued that little sucker back on there, and it lined up and you can't even tell. So here I'm going to trim this orange fun foam off. And now we're going to glue the red fun foam panel, which is the Distress Oxide, onto a red card base. And it's more like a deep red, not maroon, like a deep cherry red maybe. Now I cut out a lot of this because it just took forever. But I took this set of leaves, which I got from last year, out of the bin from Miss Sparkle & Company. I used red, rouge, sauna, eucalyptus, and over coffee in Captain Pooler inks. And then I used the same colors to do the little stems, because that stamp set comes with the stems to go and the veins to go inside the leaves. After I cut all of those out by hand, I did not use my brother's Scan and Cut because I was watching something, so I didn't mind fussy cutting. I went over the edges with each one with a embossing pen. This one is a Letterette embossing marker. I varied between copper embossing powder, liquid platinum, and gold for the edges of all the leaves. So here's the 3 cards that we did. And now we're going to make our sentiment panels. I used vellum for all 3. One is a larger square, one's a smaller square, and one's a circle. And they're all pink and Maine dyes. They were given to me, so I can't tell you what the sets are. Those are just what was given to me and what I have. The first one says Gather. And I used Icing on the Cake ink by Catherine Pooler for that. Stamped it 3 times, covered it with clear embossing powder. And I powdered up my vellum with the anti-static bag very well on each one before I added the ink and the powder, the embossing powder. The second one, I think, says Autumn Thanks, Give Thanks. And that's in the rouge. And then the third one is, I can't remember, guys. It's in eucalyptus, the color eucalyptus. Autumn Gratitude, I think it says. Yes. I was trying to stick to the stamp sets, the mini stamp sets. So I had to use what was available to me. Now that those are all done, we're going to arrange a set of leaves on each one. The larger one, I think, has 4 leaves. I think the other 2 smaller ones only have 3 leaves. And I used the Lawn Fawn glue tube because it dries slightly faster than the art glitter glue. Oh, sorry if you can hear the dog. This microphone's better than the one I was using, but you can hear more in the background. I'm not in the car tonight, if that makes a difference. So that first one, I have 3 pieces of gold and cream twine held together with a bigger bow. We're going to do another bow on the second card, but it's going to be slightly smaller. So I wanted to show you guys how I finally finagled it together. And it's a little bit harder when you're using more than one strand, but that twine by itself was just too thin for what I was looking for. And my purpose of that is to add a little bit of embellishment, but also to cover up where the stems of the leaves all meet. Now on that third one, we don't use a bow. I use April crystals by Studio Katia. And I like those crystals because they're not pure white. There's some clear ones like diamonds, and there's also some that are like a cream colored off-white. And they went perfect on this third card. And in case you didn't see, that third card has a black card base. So I started out putting only like 3 on there, and then decided to do groupings of 3 in the 3 spots that I put them. And because I only glued the vellum down on the panel where it was covered by leaves, I glued a bigger jewel down at the bottom on that third panel to kind of hold that circle down. So those are those 3, and there is one additional card that we're going to work on real quick. I used an older stamp set for the first 3 cards, and the embossing folder from this year. So I wanted to use the new stamp set I picked up. So here I went over my Bristol smooth cardstock with frayed burlap, covered the entire panel, and now I'm using my burlap stencil by Tim Holtz, which was already in my stash. And I'm going over it first with walnut stain, vintage photo. After I go over it with vintage photo, and I had to move the stencil over a little because it was skinnier than the card bases or the card fronts, I turned it sideways and I went over it with walnut stain. I wanted it to really look like old burlap. And then the third color I added on there after turning it vertical again was ground espresso. But I took a break in between to clean up my glass mat. There was a lot of ink on there. Excuse me. I'm trying to move away from the microphone. I don't know if it's working. Okay, so after that, I dried a little bit. Not much. I put it in my splat box, and I use some of that Tattered Angels Pearl Mist, I think it is. And then I use a little bit of water also, and dab at the spots from the water, and then heat set it. And then I trim that panel down to 4 by 5 1/4. Oh, look, another piece of craft cardstock, guys. I make my card base. And we're going to, I don't know if I do it yet, but eventually we're going to tape that flat down, that background flat down to the card front, the card base. I don't know if you could see, I stamped out 2 stamps here from that newer stamp set. I'm so sorry, you guys. But I only end up using the top stamps, so I cut everything that had to do with the truck out so the video wouldn't be as long. So I'm going to use a rectangle infinity die from Hero Arts already in my stash to cut out that top thing. And that's a cute little sign. It's like a sign for a pumpkin patch. Can't remember exactly what it says. Like I said, my screen on my phone is a lot smaller than what you guys watch if you watch these videos on the computer. Use the tape runner and put that on our card base, the burlap. I thought about ripping the edges of the cardstock for the burlap and decided against it. I didn't want to mess up what I had going on. Now I'm just going to take the curved part of a protractor, and I wanted to curve the top of that sign. I didn't like it straight edged. And then I take some Rusty Hinge regular distress ink, and I use a little tiny sponge dauber, and I wanted it to look scratchy and blotchy. That's why I didn't go in with a small blending brush. And I just go all the way around the edges. And I really like the way that looks. I like the Rusty Hinge. I think it's perfect. I did do a little Copa coloring in the middle of that pumpkin there, but that sign was mostly black. Even the leaves, the pumpkin leaves, were inked in black. I used some of that foam tape. It's doubled up because it's left over from another card, and I placed that popped up on the front towards the top center. And I thought about putting a sentiment on there, but with the words on the sign, I decided just to go with the inside of the card. So there's a little pumpkin, and it says, "Welcome to our patch." And that's also from that new stamp set. And I'm just going to tape that to the inside of our card, and we're pretty much done. You guys can get close-ups for all of them. Stay tuned for the next video in the series, which will be Halloween cards on a budget. And I hope you guys like what you see. I know it's been a while since I did a personal video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button in case you aren't subscribed already. And make sure to hit the notification button because we have at least one giveaway every month. By the way, the winner for the Craft Galley card, since that video went up at midnight on Wednesday before the giveaway closed, the winner will be announced in next week's Craft Galley video next Wednesday on the 9th. For now, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye for now.